Good morning. This is the Budget and Public Employees Committee. Today is November 19th. It is 10:07. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Sanye. Vice Chair Browning.
Present.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderman Devote.
Present.
Chair Aldrich.
Present.
Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Velasquez. We have 3 present.
With that, we have established a quorum. I'll take a motion to approve minutes from Wednesday, November 5th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Sanye. Vice Chair Browning.
Aye.
Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderman Devote.
Aye.
Chair Aldrich.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Velasquez. We have 3 aye votes.
With that, we will move to item number 4, Board's Bill for Review, which will be Board Bill 100, introduced by Alderwoman Jamie Cox Antweet, co-sponsored by Brett Narayan, Shamim Clark Hubbard, President Green. Madam Clerk, please add me as a co-sponsor.
Noted.
And Alderwoman from the 8th, whenever you're ready, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Today, I am here to present Board Bill 100, which is the subject of the earnings tax. This board would put toward the voters the question of whether to renew our city's earnings tax. This is a process by state statute, which we have to do every 5 years, and the next year up due will be 2026. With me today for this discussion, I have Budget Director Paul Payne, as well as representatives from the Comptroller's Office and the City Collector of Revenue's Office for any questions. And I will now ask Budget Director Payne to come and present a brief presentation on the relevance of renewing this earnings tax.
Gotcha. Director, come up, say your first and last name. We've missed you since budget season. We may start early this year and see you sooner than later.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Payne. I'm the Budget Director. Good morning. Good morning. Yes, I'd like to start with the presentation this morning. As you can see, it's on screen, so I'll just go right into it. Just to recap what we just discussed, in November 2010, the voters were asked to reaffirm, both Kansas City and St. Louis reaffirm the earnings tax every 5 years. We have done that. In 2011, we approved it by 88% of the vote, 72% in 2016, and 79% in 2021. And this would be the 4th of these, which is due in April of 2026.
Director, can you talk a little bit maybe to the mic?
Oh, sure. Let me bring it up. One of the little discussion about the revenue structure in the city of St. Louis. As you're familiar with the budget and being the budget committee, you're aware that the earnings tax currently in this year's budget, we have a total of $607.4 million in the budget. Of which 38.2% is represented by the earnings tax. And you can see, as in most municipalities, the revenue structure is distributed among various revenues comprised of taxes, licenses, and fees. And the earnings tax is just simply the largest of those within the general revenue fund. And from actual numbers in FY25, you can see tax of $208.5 million, in property taxes 78.3, sales taxes 62.2, payroll tax 44.7. So you can see how those fall in terms of the major categories. Of course, our goal of the revenue structure is to maintain a diverse base that grows with the economy and sufficient to maintain city services. So you want to have revenue that reflects the underlying economy and does not get a fixed rate structure which does not grow and maintain the cost of service. So some of these desirable characteristics of a revenue structure: equity and fairness. You don't want to impose a tax that most heavily on those least able to pay. You also want to be able to recoup the costs of those services provided, so you want to be able to get fees from the users of those services and residents alike, and that's particularly the St. Louis, which has a lot of commuter and those who come into the city beyond those their city residents. As I mentioned, you want to have a structure that grows with the economy, and you want to have a structure that shows reasonableness in relation to impact on the economic activity. You do not want to discourage business development within the city with your revenue structure. And finally, ease of enforcement and collection. That's just state basically you need to have a sources that can be collected without too much overhead and somewhat not overburdensome with collection effort. Approximately 75% of city general revenue is distributed among the top 5 sources, so it is diverse in that sense. Each has strengths and weaknesses in meeting these desirable characteristics that we just discussed, and it collectively represents a diverse base that grows modestly with the economy and distributes the tax burden among those that benefit from city services. And when I mention city services, it should point out that city services have a regional reach. As I mentioned, we have major sports and entertainment venues in the city, the Arch and the Riverfront, all the stadiums, Forest Park, zoo, museum, all such, Grand Center, Convention Center, et cetera. So the current city earnings tax was first imposed in 1959. It's an individual tax of 1% of earnings of residents and non-residents of the city for work done or performed in the city. It also comprises a corporate tax of 1% of net business profits from businesses or business conducted in the city. The individual portion of the earnings tax it totals just under 80% of the total earnings tax receipts, so the business portion, the corporate represents about 22% in the last fiscal year. Other major cities imposing earnings or income taxes, you can see a list there from Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Louisville, Kansas City, New York, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. I should point out, it's often confused, the city has an earnings tax. It's not an income tax. There's a difference there, right? What we tax are actual earnings, so not income. Income would also comprise, let's say, Social Security checks or interest earnings or retirees, 401ks or whatever. So what we're talking about is actual earnings earned within the city. So some of the growth rate of the three, actually went out further. I did 5-year, 10-year, and 15-year on the earnings, property tax, and sales tax as sort of a rate of comparison. Of the three, the earnings tax has been the most consistent growth. We've seen some growth in the property tax over the last 3 years, which has exceeded the earnings tax. But over the longer term, it's been more consistent with the earnings tax. The sales tax has historically been weak, although with inflation going up late in the last few years, it has also picked up in its growth rate. As the largest source of general revenue, $208.5 million in last fiscal year, the earnings tax provides the most funds for city services. And just as an illustration, total FY26 general fund cost the police department at $178.5 million. The earnings tax exceeds that entire amount. Or if you look at these other services provided, it gives you an idea. The earnings tax exceeds the costs of all these other services. That would be fire department, corrections, forestry, park maintenance, street and alley lighting, neighborhood stabilization services, and our equipment services. All of those services in total are less than what the city earnings tax brings in the general fund. So you want to discuss, there's often to say, well, why can't we use the property tax as a replacement? Well, what would that mean? Well, in order to get the same amount of money as the property tax, this is an illustration. Basically, the earnings tax is estimated to bring in $232.3 million this current fiscal year. Property tax, and this is talking about all jurisdictions, is estimated to bring in $438 million, $438.7. And with the current rate of $8.11 and change. The additional rate to compensate for the earnings tax based on that would be another over $4.29 in the actual tax levy. and of course, that creates a problem because that exceeds the actual authorized levy by state statute. But just to illustrate what that would mean, that's a 52.9% increase over what you would, basic homeowners and businesses would be paying in their property tax. I'll take the middle example, a home worth about $250,000, and with cars at $35,000, current tax burden is just under $5,000 a year, $4,800. Well, your tax bill would go up to $7,340. That's an increase of $2,500 or 52%. And each illustration there, you can see it's proportionate, but that would be a significant increase in the property tax. What about the sales tax? Well, the sales tax is similarly restricted as the city's current rate reflects most sales tax options. In other words, we've taken advantage of most of those rates that are allowed under state statute. But also, as I mentioned, has a historically weaker growth rate, and it's a regressive nature. Basically, it's a regressive tax when you talk about who has the ability to pay. And how much would you need in a sales tax to replace the amount of money generated by the earnings tax? Well, this illustration shows that with the current, it shows the total sales tax rate, which is 9.679%, of which, and now that's the total rate. Now, 4.255 is the sales tax for the state. The school board also has 2/3 of a cent, 0.667, which leaves the other 4.79 rate as the city. Well, the city would have to increase its rate by over 4% to generate the same amount of revenue to make up for the loss of the earnings tax. And so you can see that in the illustration of the chart. The total sales tax rate, which is already high comparatively with other cities, would exceed 13.7%. Other considerations? Well, obviously, given that it's such a large portion of our budget, there would be credit risks if we ever lost the earnings tax, questions related to uncertainties in our revenue stream, and basically call into question the city's fiscal stability and credit worthiness. And on the TIF, I mentioned the TIF finance developments because you've already also have many agreements or financing arrangements that have been entered into that are reliant on that source of funds. And of course, every year, as the Budget Committee, as you're familiar with, we have existing budget challenges. In other words, we're already facing challenges with finding sufficient funds to maintain our structural budget as well as our capital improvement needs. And so those are a lot of things to consider and just highlight the importance of maintaining the earnings tax going forward. And that's the conclusion of my presentation. I'll be available for any questions.
All right. Quickly, did maybe sponsor, did the comptroller or the collector revenue want to weigh in? Looks like no from the comptroller. Good. Gotcha. All right, we'll go in order of seniority. Alderman Vice Chair Browning.
Thank you, Director. This is a good overview, and I think it's hard to understate the importance of this tax to our city. It boggles my mind that we think it's a good idea, or I don't think we thought it was a good idea, but I think the state thought it was a good idea to make us have to pass this every 5 years because it is such an important tax to our city services, including things that Jefferson City purports to support, like our police. I'm curious about some of the considerations on this last slide that you presented. I think one of the questions that's going to come up with a lot of residents is, I don't like taxes, I don't like paying taxes, but what, in more plain terms, what is at risk if we do not renew this tax?
Well, I would think, first and foremost, all of those services that I mentioned, everything from fire to forestry to parks to streets, with the earnings tax providing 38% of the general fund budget. Were we to lose that without a dedicated source to replace it, all of those would be at risk. And I mean, this would be excessive loss. I mean, we've gone through recessions before where we've had to deal with budget cuts. This is more than that. This is would be a permanent loss of our major source of funding for the general fund. And that's a major, and I can't understate the impact that would have on the budget.
Can you go a little bit more into the slides that impact on finance TIF developments?
Yeah, and the reason why I bring that up is because if you are a developer where you've issued bonds to finance a project, you've got a dedicated sources of revenues, and it's based on those sources. If all of a sudden the sources of revenues that were identified, the revenue picture, and I believe you've probably seen them before. Hey, we expect to get this much in the restaurant tax and hotel tax or whatever it happens to be being financed. Part of that revenue stream is going to be earnings tax, right? And if suddenly that was to change and be eliminated or be phased out in terms of your projections for your financing, then that's going to have a negative impact on each one of those that has that as a revenue source for paying back those bonds.
Thank you. I think it just shows that we've always planned to have this tax. It's built into so many different things in our city.
Complicated subject.
Alderman, are you?
Clerk, I would ask that you add me as a co-sponsor to this bill. Thank you.
Noted.
No questions for myself. Well, I'd actually do. I hate when alders say no questions, and we got one. On the last slide, you talked about how bad if we lose the earnings tax it would be. In your 10 years budget director, have you or the budget division looked at the potential if we lose the earnings tax of what other revenue sources that, we could potentially, create? Because my fear is that, one day voters will probably be like, no, and we know how important it is to the city of St. Louis. So are we doing preparation to look at other revenues, knowing that it is like 1/3 of our budget?
I think that's we've been fortunate in that the message that has gotten out is that how important this is. Now, we have taken a look at the revenue structure overall. If you remember, I think it was fiscal 2003 when or 2004 when 24 when I made the presentation to the Revenue Advisory Council. And one of the things I'd like to point out when we talk about the earnings tax is that most of the time we're focused on general revenue and but if you're looking at tax structure and you're looking at the city, it's not just the city that imposes taxes. There are also other jurisdictions, the Zoo Museum District and the school board and all. If you look at our total tax structure, what is the single largest source of taxes in the city of St. Louis? It's not the earnings tax, it's the property tax. And most of that, the city only receives 20% of that. I don't think people realize that, but most of that goes to the school board and these other jurisdictions. Similarly, on the sales tax, which is often mentioned as a possibility, sales taxes, if you take in all the rates, not just general fund, but all the special funds we have, plus the school board has a rate, plus the regional parks has a rate, that also exceeds both the earnings tax and payroll tax combined. So when you look at tax structure, you have to look at what is imposed in the city entirely. And I think you'll see that the earnings and payroll taxes are actually third on that list. And it's difficult to, when you already have property tax, which is nearly double the earnings and payroll tax, I'm talking as the city as a whole, all the jurisdictions. And same thing with the sales tax. If you put those off the table, that makes it very difficult to identify sources that would grow and provide the same reliability in a revenue stream that the earnings tax provides.
Gotcha. Thank you, Director. Seeing no other questions from the committee, Alderwoman Cox-Antwiet, you are recognized to close on Board Bill 100.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for hearing this presentation today. I just want to close by reiterating what we heard from Director Payne about the importance and significance of this earnings tax for the fiscal stability of our city. It's not just important in order for us to maintain the services that we outlined, but it's also important for the longevity of our city. And to anyone from the public, as we heard, that may have questions about why we want to prioritize the earnings tax. I think a 1% earnings tax is better than a 50% increase in your property taxes. A 1% earnings tax is better than a 1% sales tax rate that is unreliable for the fiscal health of our cities. So I think this presentation is very important for the public to hear and make clear why we need to renew this earnings tax and why it's important for the longevity and health of our city. I want to thank my colleagues for all signing on as co-sponsors of this legislation. I really appreciate that. And I hope that if we are able to pass this out of committee today, we can make sure that voters around the city hear going forward, once this is on the ballot before them, how important it is for this legislation to move forward. So with that, I close and ask for your favorable consideration of Board Bill 100.
Madam Clerk, I'd like to make a motion that we embank Board Bill 100.
Second.
Previous roll. Hearing no objections, Board Bill 100 has been banked by the whole Budget and Public Employees Committee. And with that, I would take a motion to pass Board Bill 100, a due pass recommendation.
I would move that we pass Board Bill 100 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous roll. Seeing no objections to previous roll, we have passed Board Bill 100 with a due pass recommendation. Congratulations, Alderwoman.
Thank you all.
All right, we'll move to item number 5, resolutions for review. We have none. Committee discussion, we have none. Madam, did we have anybody sign up in person for Board Bill 100?
We have none.
Do we have any written testimony for Board Bill 100?
We have none.
All right. With that, next is announcements. Just want to let everyone know that next, on December 3rd, we will have a budget committee hearing at 6 p.m. to talk Rams interest from the Rams board bill that we passed. We will not have one next week because that will be the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So that is my announcement. Any other announcements from any committee members? Seeing none, I'd like to Madam Clerk, please excuse the Alderwoman from the 6th and the Alderwoman from the 7th for necessary absence, and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.